Jessica Le Mazurier, thanks for that news update. After a bitter, often divisive French presidential election campaign, now comes the transition. At a Tuesday ceremony commemorating the Allied victory over the Nazis, the outgoing Nicolas Sarkozy, the incoming François Hollande, side by side for the first time since Sunday's election, a moment of national consensus that matters for more reasons than one. After all, France's place on the world stage largely defined by the way the world was redrawn after World War II. So how will France's first socialist president in 17 years differ from his predecessors? François Hollande cheered in many quarters for his pro-growth stance on Europe, but Barack Obama expected to give him an earful over Hollande's announced plan to pull troops from Afghanistan earlier than expected, the two of them sitting down at the White House ahead of next week's G8 and NATO summits. The often cozy relationship with African leaders, relations with Israel and Iran, the image projected abroad by the new president, all that coming up today in the France 24 debate. The world awaits François Hollande. And with us to talk about it, Pierre Conessa, former strategist at the French Defense Ministry, today with the prestigious French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Welcome back, sir. Welcome to Vincent Jauvert, senior correspondent for Le Nouvel Observateur, getting ready to pack your bags to go to the G8 and G20 summits. And Judah Grunstein, editor-in-chief of World Politics Review, has been weighing in on this very subject. Welcome, sir. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and on Twitter, our handle at FrancoisF24. Before we go to our panel, let's go to our agendas. For all the critics who lament François Hollande's untested status on the world stage, well, those tests are about to come fast and furious.
He's barely had time to celebrate, and yet François Hollande's presidential calendar is already full up. On the 15th of May, Nicolas Sarkozy will hand over the keys to the Élysée Palace, and François Hollande will be sworn in as France's new president. That very same day, he'll have to choose his prime minister. On the 16th of May, we'll find out the lineup of his new government before he jets off to Berlin for his first meeting with Angela Merkel. He'll be flying a lot over the following days. From the 18th to the 19th of May, he'll be in Camp David in the USA for the G8 summit. Then, on the 20th and 21st, he'll head over to Chicago for the NATO summit. From there, it's back over the pond to the UK from the 2nd to the 5th of June for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebrations. However, slight blemish on the itinerary, Queen Elizabeth II only receives married couples, which means Hollande's partner Valérie Trierweiler will stay in Paris. Back in France, preparations will be underway for the parliamentary elections. At this time, Sarkozy's cabinet will still be in power, although Parliament will be in recess.
During the break, the government will do what all governments do. When Parliament is not in session, it will manage France's political affairs. It can proceed with nominations. And where necessary, it can issue decrees.
The new president can in fact proceed with certain issues by decree, like the fuel price freeze he promised in his campaign. And from the 10th to the 17th of June, the ballot box is open for the parliamentary elections. It's a packed schedule for France's incoming president as he begins the apotheosis of his political career.
And Vincent Jauvert, François Hollande, really untested on the world stage, as we said at the outset. Those meetings are going to matter a lot.
Yes, because he's untested, he was not in charge of international affairs.
Did a summer internship, I believe, in the U.S., but that's
well, no, it's a little bit harsh. But also because he has domestic elections coming, and he has to show in the first days of his presidency that he is a great leader. So it's very, very important for him, not only for international reasons, but also for domestic reasons. So that's why he's preparing very, very hardly and deeply all those meetings.
Okay, a chance to seem presidential. Pierre Conessa, will the calendar be kind or cruel to him in that respect in the run-up to those parliamentary elections?
Well, it's very difficult to know precisely what Mr. Hollande thinks about international affairs, because when you regard what was his agenda, you know, there were 60 points in the agenda, just 4 regarding the international affairs. So I think that French opinion is not so interested by the summit he will attend. So I don't think that this date will be very significant for the rest of his presidency.
Judah Grunstein, this is nonetheless a globalized world. What do you think about a guy who, for instance, has never been to China?
Well, I'd have to be in that club myself, so I'd probably be generous with him. I think that there are a couple things. I think we exaggerate a little bit about the question of international experience. Very few presidents are elected on the basis of experience in international affairs. It's always domestic politics. It's the same everywhere. There's always a 60-point agenda and 4 points on foreign policy, whether you're in the United States, France, or elsewhere. So that's the first thing. The second thing is also François Hollande has traveled to other countries. He has had inter-party relationships with Socialist Party leaders, with left-of-center leaders. The problem, of course, is that in Europe right now there aren't too many of them left, but that could change. But he has experience with traveling, representing a party at the very least, and a political affiliation. And then the final thing is that this is a guy who was in ENA, the École Normale d'Administration of France.
The top civil servant school.
He's an extremely intelligent, extremely prepared person. There's no reason to expect that he won't be able to integrate the facts, the relationships, the pieces of the puzzle in international affairs any less well than he has for domestic affairs. So I think that there's really no reason to assume that he won't be a very competent leader for France. That doesn't necessarily mean that he'll be a very effective one or a very dynamic one who's able to move lines the way that Sarkozy was. But I don't think there's any reason to believe that he'll fail or that he'll be incompetent in the job.
The first foreign policy test, we of course know it's the trip to Berlin where he'll meet with Angela Merkel. Let's pay attention, though, to the second one. Ahead of that G8 summit, Obama sits down with Hollande at the White House. Here's how it was announced from the president's office in the U.S.
President Obama and President-elect Hollande each reaffirmed in that phone call the important and enduring alliance between the people of the United States and France. And that alliance is strong and as strong today as it was last week.
Is it as strong as it was last week, since Hollande has announced that the French are going to be pulling their troops, begin their drawdown from Afghanistan sooner than thought, 2 years sooner than thought, and that's ahead of the plan being 2014?
Well, remember that Sarkozy said 2013 very recently, so the idea is on the move. I think that both need a success. President Obama for the reasons you know, and Hollande also for domestic reasons. I disagree with you. He really needs that for domestic purposes. Remember that President Sarkozy wanted to meet President Obama many times and he failed. So being received, welcomed at the White House for a long time, maybe for a lunch, it's a very important gift from the president, from the U.S. president. I suppose it means that they will both make concessions. And I suppose François Hollande will make concessions on Afghanistan. He already had saying that it's maybe a matter of weeks, that it may take longer than expected, especially to take out the material. So I suppose on that side, Hollande will be softer, and I suppose Hollande will give something regarding Iran to President Obama. France is very harsh on its position on Iran, the harshest on Iran. It's disturbing the U.S. position, and I suppose that Hollande will say, okay, we will let you do what you want on Iran, and we won't be as aggressive as we were, and you let us withdraw our troop a little bit earlier than expected by you, and then it's going to be a deal, I suppose, like that.
All right, a lot of careful considerations there. Pierre Conessa, on this issue, the Americans perhaps not happy that, and some have expressed this to reporters about the announcement of that early withdrawal from Afghanistan. On the other hand, pleased, at least privately, they've been quoted in the press, people inside the White House, the fact that Hollande's going to try to push the Germans on the issue of growth. So do you think it'll be a good meeting, the one between Obama and Hollande, or do you think it'll be a tense one?
Yes, I do think that the two guys have interest to feel an agreement, and to find an agreement, and probably it will be something to show that probably for Hollande to demonstrate, to show that he's slightly different of Sarkozy. So we will probably announce an agenda, but it's not so different than the usual agenda, just a few months before the rest, just to explain that he took his position, after death of French military men. But I do think that the main issue on which Hollande can show the difference with Sarkozy is probably on Iran file, in which probably will be less
hawkish.
Yeah, less.
I agree.
And I do think that on that case, he will let the lead to Obama.
Judah Grunstein.
Well, I think there are a couple of things to remember about Afghanistan. The problem with Hollande's position is that he's saying out loud what everyone knows, but is thinking, but not saying out loud. That's a problem, but it's also part of the solution. The second thing is that the Afghanistan war in France is an extremely unpopular war that has had zero political effect. It's a war that consistently 2/3 of the population opposes, but had zero impact on the campaign. Every now and then, if there's a major event in Afghanistan that costs the lives of French troops, there's an expression by the politicians and by the president. But the fact is, it's really a forgotten war here, and so I think that the problem for Hollande is how to finesse it so that he doesn't come away looking like he gave up a promise before the legislative elections here. But at the same time, everyone here has every reason to reach an agreement. The United States doesn't have an interest in France being weakened and the French president being losing his legitimacy before he even has a majority in the parliament. So I agree. And I think Iran is a pretty good possibility candidate for compromise because the Americans have been beginning to give signs that they're willing to walk back their position and allow domestic enrichment of uranium. And the French have really been the ones who have drawn a red line around that. So I think that if there's a little give there, that on Afghanistan they'll find an agreement mid-2013 as opposed to the end or something like that.
And joining us now for the discussion, Belgian member of the European Parliament, Annemie Nets-Uterbroek. Thank you for being with us. Do you think that the French have been too hawkish up to now when it comes to Iran?
Well, I think that they have been especially strong in rhetoric and found it very difficult to follow up with effective action. And there I foresee that there's going to be a better balance between what is being said and what can effectively be done and what can indeed lead to a good solution or a good evolution of the situation in Iran. So it's not so much a matter of France having been too hard, but maybe that rhetoric has been too strident, and that it would be a good evolution if the rhetoric was toned down a little.
Your feeling on as we enter the Hollande presidency, the way foreign policy has been conducted more generally out of Paris, is Iran symptomatic of the way Sarkozy ran things?
No, I think that concerning Iran, Sarkozy had extremely strong personal convictions, which deep in their hearts many people share, namely that the eventual acquisition of Iran of military nuclear capability is a danger and poses a huge threat. The question is, for me, is about effectiveness. Is how to achieve good results. That is how to convince Iran by a mixture of sticks and carrots that it would be much better to give guarantees that their nuclear capacity will be only civilian. And that's going to be difficult enough for them to achieve. And it's very important that those who negotiate with Iran, and which are being led by Baroness Ashton, by the way, are united. And this is what I hope for and what I find most important.
All right, under Nicolas Sarkozy's tenure, the outgoing president, France often taking the initiative on other matters, most notably, you'll recall, on Libya.
Vive Benghazi! Vive la Libye! Vive l'amitié entre la France et la Libye!
France's headfirst dive into that conflict, Pierre Connaissant, is that a one-off, a parenthesis that we'll never see again?
Well, you know, it's quite difficult now to explain this military attitude of Sarkozy regarding the Libyan affairs. And everyone knows that the decision has been a very strange process, you know, in which some intellectuals, some political aspects, etc. I do think that regarding the opinion inside the Socialist Party in France, the foreign affairs are quite, there are not unity on some international affairs inside the Socialist Party. There are two trends. One would say is more Mitterrand and Gaullist trends, which I tried to make France a very quite independent foreign diplomacy. And the other one is quite similar to the Sarkozy's one, mainly when we regard on Middle East affairs, on the international Libyan affairs, etc., in which the result of the military intervention is not so good today, because regarding the election, regarding the focal point of the political society in Libya, no one can say that it was a really simple decision with just positive effects. So probably Hollande will be more careful about all this crisis regarding Syria, regarding all other Arab summer events, you know.
We're going to pick up on that point when we come back, because it's, I think, an important one on how French foreign policy is conducted. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.